This gaming PC is keeping my shot because if you try to press the power button, nothing ever happens. Like despite it being plugged into power with the power supply switched on, if you press the power button, you get nothing. So what exactly is going on here to cause this PC to no longer turn on? Well, I like to say every PC has a story, and this one's definitely got one to tell that might just reveal everything, and it basically does. See, it goes back about 2 months at this point. Our customer said that when he had the system, he spilled a little bit of water on it about 2 months ago. At that time, he spilled that water, he shut the PC off, and turned it back on within about 5 minutes of that, which is probably way too soon without drying anything off. Immediately after doing that, the system would actually turn on, then turn off, turn on, and off, with the lights and fans basically flickering. But then after that, eventually the PC ended up just like this, and has been sitting ever since, waiting for somebody to fix it like us. So I'm gonna assume right now we probably have some kind of shorted out component that's causing everything to act up. So let's first figure out what component's even causing this behavior. Or maybe I should say components, because it is water damage after all, which could have taken out multiple things. But anytime I do have a system where the power button is unresponsive, the first thing I like to do and start all my testing is to check out the power supply. Because although water seepage from the top is pretty low, there is a small section on the back here where water could have easily gotten in, as well as on this perforated back panel where we'll see that this is a pretty cheap power supply. Actually, I should say really cheap, because when I pulled this out to figure out what kind of power supply this was, I noticed it was from Leadway, a brand I've never heard of. Apparently it's a 400 watt unit, but I don't see any kind of 80 plus rating on it or anything like that, which gives me very little confidence in it. As at least most decent power supplies these days actually have a lot of protections in place where if water were to get into them, because they are a highly sensitive component, they would fail, but they wouldn't damage everything else. But with no-name brands like these, you never know. Either way though, we can't say anything until we test it, so that's why we're gonna go ahead and pull out our Dr. Power 3 power supply tester and go ahead and see what's happening. I love this little guy because it makes it super easy to pull out the 24 pin directly off the motherboard and then hook that up to the bottom of the power supply tester. Then if we add power back to the back of the system and turn the power supply on, which we can do, we can go ahead and just run a quick test just on the 24 pin. We can do the rest of the connections later, but let's go ahead and just zoom in a little bit and press the power button on there. We'll see the fans kind of tried to start, but we immediately fail. Like we got failures on the 12 volt, 5 volt, and 3.3 all at the same time. Just off this 24 pin, which does not look good for this power supply. But I don't think it's actually bad, because when I was just about to hook up a spare testing power supply to see what's up, I noticed that if I go ahead and unplug the 4-pin CPU power connector, that's because the 8-pin is not available here. It's just a single 4-pin on this particular motherboard. Then turn our power supply back on and run the power supply tester again, we'll see that all the lights just fired right up, and we're no longer getting the air on the 24 pin. And if I hook up that 4-pin to the tester and turn the system on, we still don't have any problems, and it even checks out during the test. So what's going on here to cause that? Because obviously our fans work, obviously we have clean power from the power supply, but when it's hooked up to the motherboard, we have some kind of unresponsive behavior. Well, that's a perfect example of some kind of short connected to the motherboard. Probably one component, or maybe the motherboard itself, is causing a short, stopping the system from being able to turn on. So what I want to do is what I call a bare bones boot. It's basically where I disconnect everything from the motherboard. This way I could just basically have a very clean boot to verify that everything's working. But the only things connected that are absolutely required for the system to turn on. That means all we need is a 24 pin and then our CPU power connector as well. Then for everything that's not absolutely required for the motherboard to actually turn on momentarily, like a GPU, we need to go ahead and remove. So let's get these screws undone so we can finally attempt to remove this card, where I noticed one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a PC. It looks like the manufacturer glued the PCIe lock shut, which is ridiculous if you can imagine, not just for upgradability, but because of the hot glue or whatever compound that they used here could have easily got into the PCIe slot, which would have damaged the motherboard in the process, all because I believe the manufacturer wanted to help with shipping reductions of like the GPU popping loose, which you could just do by packaging it correctly. So WIWB, yeah, don't do that again. And never do this on your RAM either. It looks like they did the same. Something like this could have gone really bad. Luckily, I think I can kind of break it apart and get this card out of the way. So we can remove things like this Wi-Fi card, which we're not gonna need right now, so let's pull that out. And we can also do this SSD from Great Wall, another off-brand product, before unplugging absolutely everything from the motherboard, just because things like the USB connections on the front of the board could absolutely cause a short back to the motherboard, causing this type of behavior. And we're even gonna undo the front panel connectors as well, because we'll just jump start the motherboard using a screwdriver on the 3rd and 4th pin, but we'll see we have absolutely no response there. So we'll go down even another level by removing this glued in RAM. Let's pull that guy out because it's not technically necessary for the system to turn on. And then we'll come back down here to the 3rd and 4th pin with our screwdriver, try to turn that on, and we still got no response. And that right there basically takes us down to 3 possibilities of components that could be causing this type of behavior. Now that we bypassed the power button, everything that's connected, all we know now is that it's either the CPU, motherboard, or possibly the CMOS battery, as that can cause this behavior, but I don't think it would have affected power loss or an unresponsive system, especially when it still tests good. But just to be safe, we can jumpstart the system and see no response. Both without it installed and replaced with a brand new one, we still get the exact same behavior. Taking us down at this point to a CPU or motherboard issue. So let's go ahead and just pull this cooler off, because the easiest way to test this is to go ahead and get this first removed, where we'll see almost no thermal paste on the CPU at all. Let's pull this cooler all the way out real quick. Looks like it all pretty much was just on the cooler side. Nothing was stuck to the CPU, which takes us down to 2 components, which makes sense why this CPU 4-pin would be causing that behavior, because really at the end of the day, the 2 main components that would have any kind of behavioral or synvex to the power supply to cause it to not turn on all the way are going to be something like the motherboard's power delivery or the CPU itself not being recognized in the motherboard. So what I want to do is go ahead and just pull this CPU out. So we're going to go ahead and just slide that over, pull out our customers. It looks like a 3500X. So we can get down to the bottom of things really quick with this AMD Ryzen 5 2400G, which we can go ahead and slot into place and lock down just like that. Putting us at a simple point where we can verify if it's the motherboard or CPU by connecting the power supply back up, switching that on, and then with our screwdriver coming back to that 3rd and 4th pin, we can go ahead and attempt to turn it on. We'll see the fans did jiggle for a second, but after that little attempt, absolutely nothing, because I'm almost certain that we just have a shorted motherboard, which is exactly what I kind of suspected the whole time, as most of the time when water is spilt on a system, if that was the case here, it actually would have come right through the top here directly onto the motherboard, which could have easily shorted something out in the process. And although there's no visible signs, it doesn't mean that nothing's happening there. It's obvious that the motherboard isn't able to distribute power to the components properly, which is why things aren't kicking on and why it's throwing a short back to the power supply, which is stopping the entire process, and why we saw that failure with our Dr. Power 3 power supply tester. So at this point now, we definitely need to go ahead and swap this motherboard, but my main concern is, did anything else get damaged in the process, like this GPU? Well, to find out, because we obviously have to swap this motherboard anyways, instead of just assembling the new board outside the case, I thought, why not just build out an entire test bench with a separate power supply and hooking up our GPU in the process. This way we can go ahead and turn the system on by shorting the 3rd and 4th pin, where take a look at that. The GPU fan kicks on, the CPU fan kicks on, the power supply fan is even on as well, and if we give the system a second, check that out, we even post. And even booted the Windows without a problem, proving my suspicion of this faulty motherboard thanks to that water damage. So with confirmation that this motherboard is bad, we need to get it unplugged from absolutely everything that's left, which is going to be our 24-pin and 4-pin power connector, before getting the board unscrewed and removed out of the system, followed by the I/O shield we no longer need. One other little thing that I noticed the second that the system showed up here at my shop was that despite the system having 7 fans installed inside this case, not a single one of them is actually bringing in fresh air. They're all normal fan blades set to be exhaust. See, traditionally when you have a case like this and you have fans on the bottom and back wall, you usually get reverse blade fans, or you flip them around to be able to have these set as intake, not exhaust, because when you have every fan set as exhaust, you have high negative pressure with the only air getting in through these little slits on the side here where the fans aren't, and back here, which basically sucks dust into the system, which let me tell you is not ideal. And although I would probably flip both of these, I'm not gonna flip these right now. The only reason I say that is there's no dust filter on the bottom of this case, which means if I flip that over, we're just gonna probably blow more dust in, but rather, I'm just gonna go ahead and flip these two by undoing these screws right here and rotating the blades around. And although this may not look as nice as it did before when it comes to performance, it's gonna be way better because we'll actually have true air intake coming through here without having to deal with just the negative pressure that sucks in the dust from the outside. We'll actually have air coming in and air going out all together. This way we can get plenty of air for all the fans that they need. And although I would have liked to be able to do it for these bottom fans, it just doesn't make sense without a dust filter. At least the mesh on the back wall here is actually pretty fine and should prevent any kind of major dust buildup from being able to really get inside the case from there. So with that sorted, let's get our motherboard now installed, which looks like it actually might require me to remove this fan temporarily, as that makes a lot more room to go ahead and slide everything into place. And with that in, you can definitely tell that this case was really designed for a compact micro ATX because it actually cuts off right about here. That's why, although this is another micro ATX motherboard, it's actually a lot shorter. Like the distance, at least the width of it, is a lot shorter. The height is about the same, but it cuts off way sooner. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It is gonna block off those fans a little bit, but the motherboard will be fine. It does technically fit. And unfortunately, I would get one of these boards, but usually they're really cheap, junky boards, or they're hard to come by. And our customer really didn't want to change the case, so this will have to do. So let's get it locked down, as it does technically use a majority of the same screw holes. And I do think it's a little dumb that manufacturers have been able to actually call both of them micro ATX, even though one of them won't fit in a different case, like as it's supposed to. Because even though this definitely is probably considered fitting, it is a little awkward to consider this as a true fit, as you guys can probably tell. With the motherboard screwed in, now let's go ahead and plug everything that we need back up into the new board. So we're gonna go ahead and get things like our front panel audio taken care of, which is gonna be really tight down here at the bottom, just because of the definitely tighter clearance with a larger board. Especially in a very compact case like this. And while I was plugging things in, I noticed that the USB 3.0 header also has that same glue that we were looking at earlier on the GPU. They really didn't want things to come unplugged. This stuff's kind of a pain to scrape off too. So with that wired up, all we gotta do is take the GPU, get that slotted into place. So with all that in, and thanks to our new motherboard having built-in wireless, we don't need this old wireless card, so we can ditch that. So with the old motherboard out and the entire system now rebuilt, we should be able to go ahead and fire this system up, where we'll see that the fans and lights all kick on because we don't have this bad board anymore. And if we give this system a second with all of our customers' hardware now, the only thing that we didn't test previously was the power supply, we should see that we post just. And even boots now into Windows without a problem, proving once and for all that we definitely have a bad motherboard on our hands. And although I don't see any liquid damage on either the back or front of the board at any point, I definitely suspect, based on the story, what probably happened is liquid probably came through the top of the case right here, went right on top of the VRM components and probably shorted something out. I haven't tested the board in depth or anything. It doesn't look like it's going to be worth it to even figure out what exactly happened, but I'm assuming that's why anytime something was plugged into that 4-pin CPU/EPS connector at the top of the motherboard, why it would actually send a air back to the power supply, which is why it failed that Dr. Power 3 power supply test, even though technically the power supply was fine. It was just getting an air receiving back from the motherboard over that connector right there. So at least we know that for sure, and this is now swapped out. And I was thinking about it a little bit more. If I was gonna have water spilt on my system right now, a motherboard failing may be the most inconvenient to get fixed, but for a customer, it probably was the cheapest fix, especially when you consider how expensive storage, SSDs, and GPUs are these days. So with this now swapped out and our system back up and running, it's time to get it back over to our customer.